All right, I might get started. There's still people jumping into the webinar, but welcome everyone. My name is Lisa Hasker from Vicsport. Thank you for taking the time to join us today to talk retention and participation. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today in all different parts of the world. We've got people from all around Australia, New Zealand, Germany, various places. So welcome to a nice winter's day here in Melbourne. We've got over 800 people signed up for the webinar. Some will join us directly and some will tap into the information later. But thank you for your interest. Obviously a very welcomed topic and something that is very relevant for all of us in this in COVID and then post-COVID environment. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker and our introducer and our panel. Can I start by introducing Professor Rochelle Eime, who is going to present today the data she's been collecting with her team over many years that will inform some information for us today, and you'll get some fantastic insights on how you can use that data, learn from that data and help your particular sporting environment. Can I introduce Hans Westerbeek, Professor Hans Westerbeek, who's going to introduce Rochelle formally for me. Hans is the Professor of International Sport Business at VU, the Head of Sport Business Insights and the Co-Director of the Sport Spatial. And so I should have given you Rochelle's title, Professor of Sport Participation. So we've got the gurus here today, and we've got two more gurus joining us who are working in sport, tackling participation retention every day. Firstly, Angela Banbury from Netball Victoria. Hey, Ange. And secondly, Eime Staples from Cricket Victoria. So we're very lucky to have a fantastic panel here today. Can I ask you, when you want to ask questions, to pop them in the chat function, and we'll endeavour to get to all of those questions after Rochelle has given her presentation. And we'll put some of those questions back to Rochelle, to Hans, and also to Ange and Emma. So welcome, thank you for joining us. I hope you're healthy and staying healthy and looking after yourselves. And can I just now hand over to Hans, Professor Hans Westerbeek, to formally introduce Rochelle and the work that the team have been doing over the last many years. Thanks, Hans.
Awesome, thank you, Lisa. Well, first I would like to thank you and your team at Vicsport for hosting this event, and also our partners, VicHealth and Sport and Recreation Victoria in particular, who have been instrumental in the work that the Sport and Recreation Spatial team has been doing over the past decade or so. It is my pleasure to introduce my colleague and friend, Professor Rochelle Eime, who indeed is the Director of Sport and Recreation Spatial, and also very much the pioneer in this space. The work that has amounted to Sport and Recreation Spatial as a project is pretty much Rochelle's life's work. So you are indeed listening and talking to one of the foremost experts in this field. She's a behavioural epidemiologist with over 15 years of experience in this space in regard to participation, spatial, as in facilities, where do we locate them and how do we link that to demand in sport, and also in the broader fields of health and education. You wouldn't say so, you know, looking at Rochelle, can't possibly be old enough to have written more than 300 peer-reviewed papers, chapters and industry reports, and garnered more than close to $6 million worth in industry funding to conduct her research. So very, very impressive track record indeed. Sport and Recreation Spatial itself is a world first and still world only project where we have access to census-based participation data across 12 sports, which amounts to over 1 million participation records every single year that are being analyzed from multiple perspectives and different angles. And some of those insights will be provided to you by Rochelle today before we enter into a discussion. The partnership for this particular project is indeed by VicHealth and Sport and Recreation Victoria, and with very strong partners such as Vicsport, who not only benefit from the data but also provide amazing input into how we can best upgrade and manipulate and improve and advance the data sets that we collect every single year. It is very much an industry partnership, and the data analysis and statistics that are being provided wouldn't make any sense if it wasn't going to benefit industry. So it's very much a partnership project. It gives me great pleasure to therefore introduce Rochelle to share the screen with us and provide some of the insights and overviews before moving to the wider panel discussion. So Rochelle, over to you.
Thanks, Lisa and Hans. It's great to be able to share with you some of our latest research on sport participation and retention. And I'm going to highlight the real issue of retention or dropout and close with some discussion on why retention and connecting individuals and communities through sport is going to be vital post-COVID-19. It's wonderful to have such a large group gathered today. Thank you for attending. I believe the registration numbers were so large that Lisa had to upgrade her Zoom subscription. And on the topic of numbers, it is pleasing to see that COVID numbers are on the decline. Just as a background, and I know Hans has given some information on this, but Sport and Recreation Spatial program of research investigates sport participation and facilities and health outcomes for evidence-based decision-making across the sport and recreation sector. It's a collaborative program of research between Federation University and Victoria University, and we have 4 main key areas of focus. Participation levels and trends, what's happening in terms of participation, what are the influences or determinants on participation, what are the health benefits of participating in sport, and what's the nexus between facilities and participation? Where do we need facilities in the future as population demographics change? As Hans summarised, very much industry-based research. We're all about knowledge translation to help the sport and recreation sector. Any of our reports or papers that are publicly available are on our website, so feel free to visit that at any stage. So the Sport Participation Research Project, which I'm going to provide data from today, is set up to provide a reliable measure of sport participation in Victoria, to be able to investigate and report on trends over time, to inform decision-making and investments for individual sports, but also for organisations like VicHealth and Sport and Recreation Victoria, how they set up their policy areas, strategic investments. And it's all about participation as well as facilities. Been working on this for a decade now, and so I'm definitely getting older. We've grown to 12 state sporting associations, so they're listed there. And what we do is annually we integrate and analyse all registered sport participation data from those sports. So that's club-based data in terms of competition, but also social and recreation programs, and we analyse and report on that. Within those 12 sports, it's around 1 million sport participation records annually. It's the largest repository of sport participation data in Australia. Sport policy does impact participation. It has been traditionally and is currently about getting more people active through sport, increasing numbers. So if a sport increases participation, let's say from 90,000 to 95,000, everyone seems to be happy. The board's happy, the government's happy. In Sport Australia, I copied this green box from Sport Australia's 2030 strategic plan, and it highlights that the policy is getting more people active. Now that's great, but as you'll see from today, I'm a big advocate on retention. I Googled some NSOs and some SSA's websites.
Rochelle, I think you've gone on to mute.
Sorry, thanks, Lisa.
Go back to where you talked to the green box.
The green box. So the Sport Australia 2030 highlights in the green box that the policy is about getting more people active. So I Googled some NSOs and some SSA strategic plans and found out that, a lot of them indicated they wanted more. more people, growing junior participation, more people more often. And so why is more better if they drop off after a year or two? And why hasn't there been a focus on retention when it should? Why focus on more? Why not focus on keeping those people engaged? Who actually strategically focuses on retention? Who in a sporting organisation has a retention KPI or retention as part of their work plan? I'd really be interested to know. It may seem that sports have been in a race, to get into schools, running their individual sports programs in an effort for them to transition into their club-based sport competitions. And maybe with a fallacy that if you touch my ball, your ball, then we've got them for life. Well, that isn't the case. And some data that I present today will highlight this. Retention is also important to keep people playing, to improve their skills. We see a significant drop-off during adolescence. So that's a critical age where we should have retention strategies. I also question too, how do you enter sport at say age 14 or 40 if you don't have those sport-specific skills? It's really important to retain people, but that may be through different playing formats. We know that people's preference for sport changes across the lifespan. So the data I'm going to present today looks at retention over 4 years from 2015 to 2018. And this is for 9 sports that we had comparable data for. And we tracked individuals' player IDs across those years. And as you can see, significant, massive data set. And I've got to thank my team for that because they're the number crunchers and the statisticians that produce these results. So we looked at continuous participation, those players that have played for all 4 years, those people that dropped out and didn't return, or those people that might have sampled the sport and come back. So they might have played in 1 year, not the next year, and then returned to playing that sport. Now I have a question for everyone, and I think Bron's going to set up a little doodle poll here. So if we've got 9 sports and people are participating for 4 years, I'd like you to tell me what you think the percentage of people still playing the same sport in 4 years' time. So from 2015, how many people are still playing that sport in 2018? So the polls are coming in, everyone's voting, which is good to see. The 25 to 50% winning at the moment. So over 50% of people have highlighted they think it's around 25 to 50%. We've still got people clicking, so we'll let them click away. Some people not wanting to have a guess. Okay, so we'll end the poll there. So 52% of people with us today said that they believe 25 to 50% of people are still retained after sport. So what we see here is red is bad and green is good. So only 31% of females and 36% of males were still playing that same sport after 4 years. But we do know that retention does differ across sports, ages and regions. And I'll come back to this later, but I really believe that retention is a simple measure, but it's a good measure of how a sport's going or how a club or an association's going. If people are coming back, they're having fun and they're enjoying themselves. If they're leaving, it's because they haven't had fun. So this indicates those that played in 2015 and those that played for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years or 4. So what we can see is those playing for 4 years, higher retention is higher amongst those where sport is most popular from 5 to 14 years of age. Quite consistent in terms of the 4-year participation once we reach adulthood. So once you've sort of got those adults engaged after the drop-off in adolescence, they're pretty much there, but it is a low percentage. There's a lot of people that only play for 1 year, and those that play intermittently as well. Retention does differ by gender. It is higher for males in general than females, but also too, keeping in mind that a lot of the sports involved with this research are traditionally male-dominated sports, where female participation is only just recently sort of been higher, and female retention is lower in those male-dominated sports. But again, you know, realistically, those numbers are quite low about how many people actually continue to play one of those sports. And another thing I'd like to highlight too is, you know, we've got this graph and the other graphs where it's sport participation and retention across the lifespan. But 53% of all sports participants are aged between 5 to 14. So we cater for such a small group of the population. So there's a lot more opportunity for sport to cater for a wider group of our population. This is just a couple of snapshots showing that retention does differ by age and region. And this is a recent report released, and it's available on our website as well as VicHealth and SRV. But it highlights that retention does differ by age. It's quite low for those that are 4 years of age. That does relate to a high sampling of those younger kids. But I also argue that are children developmentally ready when they're the age of 4 to play organised competitive sport or organised sport in terms of a modified sports program? You know, we don't allow our children to start school, even homeschooling, until they're 5. So should we be getting children as young as 4 engaged in sport? And we know that retention's a lot lower for those early adopters. Gunnewarra Shire has the highest rates of retention and lowest in the city of Melbourne. But we also got to consider the population density of the city of Melbourne, and a lot of people in those areas pre-COVID would generally, you know, sort of go to the gym, or they might, you know, go for a walk or a run, currently within their 5 kilometres from home. This graph shows a 4-year pattern of participation by age, and I've got the colours wrong here because green is not good. Green is those that depart and don't come out, those that drop out by age. So the actual intermittent is quite small. There's really low rates of sampling when people come back within a 4-year period, and continuous participation is quite low. So a lot of people leave sport within a small period of time, but who asks them when they've left? If you leave a sporting club, does that club or that association or that SSA or NSO sort of find out why you've left? I've never been asked, you know, why I've left clubs. I've only left clubs because I've moved. You know, we often ask people who are playing sport what they like about it, what formats, but that's only catering for those that are still engaged in that format. We need to understand why people have dropped out and how we can try and retain those people. So what are some of the reasons why people drop out? We've done a lot of research over the past decade on why people play and why they drop out of sport across from children, adolescents, adults and older adults. And it's really quite simple. People stop playing when it's not fun anymore. People play sport for choice, and they play because it's supposed to be fun, and they'll keep playing as long as it's fun and enjoyable. You know, we have modified sports programs, which are great. They're all about fun, friends, fitness and skill development for those youngsters. And then what we offer them is club competition. And club competition is great. It's great for those that are good at competition, and it's great for those that enjoy that competitive nature. But, you know, we've got those 4 little kids on the bench there, and I can tell you pre-COVID in Ballarat, when it's sub-0 degrees and there's children on the footy bench, they're not warm on the bench, they're not having fun, and they're freezing, and they're not getting game time if they don't have those higher skill levels. So why do we promote those that are better at sport to keep playing sport, and then they get better? Children and adolescents know if they don't have the same competency levels, or they're not as good as other people in their team. And we sort of have I call it a sheep drafting effect. So, you know, I come from a farm in South Australia that I grew up in, and we sort of had this open and shut gate, like the sheep drafting, that when children are, say, 10, there might be 3 under 10 teams. And then 12, there might be 2 under 12 teams. And then 14, there's only sort of 1 team. So we sort of shut the gate on those that aren't as good and as higher level participants in sport. We don't sort of have another option for them. And then too, when we get to adulthood, you know, above 18, there might only be, you know, an A grade and a reserves team for all adults. So if you're not good enough, you're not going to put yourself out there to participate. But you also need a certain level of skill and competency, but I believe a similar level of skill and competency. If Lisa Hasker is really good at basketball and I'm crap, we're not going to have fun playing pickup. You know, to have fun and enjoy playing sport, you've got to have a similar level of competency. I mean, there was a window of opportunity with my adolescent boys where we were a similar level of tennis and we had fun, and now they're way too good and no one's having fun. At the individual level too, physical literacy is really important. So it's not just skills for the sport, it's their confidence to be able to play. And they play for fun and enjoyment. But we also see too, in terms of at a population level, but also too for adolescents, there's a lot of preference for other non-structured activities. So a lot of adolescents in sport drop out, you know, when they've got to train 2 or 3 times a week and commit to long seasons and competition. But it's much easier for them to just put on a set of headphones and go for a run. We know that peer and family support is really important to people playing sport and retained in sport. Peers make a big influence during adolescence, and family is so important for children. They're the gatekeepers of whether or not the children sort of play sport or not. Another reason why people drop out is because of the competition structure or the programs. So we really need to stop and think about what is the length of the game or the season. How much are we making people commit to training and competition? And can we have sort of a competitive model as well as some other organised but sort of social and recreation programs too? Another key reason why people drop out of sport is due to the club environment, the club culture, the coaching, the inclusiveness. You know, people just want a nice, happy space to run around in and have fun. We conducted a study during COVID lockdown 1 in May, June, and we asked people their sport and physical activity profiles pre-COVID and during COVID, as well as their motivations to playing sport and why they have fun playing sport. So this is the results from the adults. So the main motivations to play are enjoyment, social reasons, physical health and fitness, performance competition, playing with friends. Quite similar male and female responses there. If we look at the adolescents, again, it's about enjoyment. That's why they play sport. It's not about winning. It's not about medals. It's not about trophies. They want to play with their friends. They want to learn new skill and for social reasons as well. There's a bit of difference here between the males and females, but not a lot. The adolescents talk about playing with others for social reasons, and adolescents talk about playing with their mates and their friends. So in the survey also, we asked what makes sport playing fun. So it's somewhat similar to the previous question, but it is a different construct. Socialising, being challenged to improve, playing with friends, keeping fit, and then winning quite a lot lower. And there's a difference between keeping fit and winning across the gender. So winning is not a high priority for adults to enjoy playing sport. And when you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, no one goes out trying to lose, but 50% of the people lose each game. So if winning was the most important thing, then 50% are really missing out each time. What makes sport fun for adolescents? Being challenged to improve, playing with their friends, trying their best, playing together well as a team, having a friendly coach, really important for females, winning a bit more important to males, but again, it's quite down on the list. earning medals and trophies further down on the list. And for females, parents showing good sportsmanship and simply not yelling at them was something they indicated helped their enjoyment of playing the game. During that same survey, we asked people during COVID over 2 weeks what their health was compared to a year ago pre-COVID. And we're analysing the results of this survey more extensively at the moment. 25% of people reported poor or worse general health, 29% worse physical health during COVID, and a worrying stat is 31% reported worse mental health during COVID. And, you know, I think that would be much higher too with stage 4 lockdowns in Melbourne, which is currently occurring. Another study I'm involved with sort of currently, led by Megan Casey at Fed Uni, was with the Ballarat Basketball Association. And this was sent out in the very small window that we did return to play basketball in regional Victoria, including Ballarat. So I think it was literally only a couple of weeks. We asked the players as well as the coaches and officials whether they would return to play post-COVID. The far majority said that they would return to play. There could be a potential bias here in terms of the people responding, who was more likely to respond to the survey, but that's some really positive statistics. The main concerns people have was not about the sports organisations doing the right thing. It was more about maybe people not doing the right thing, you know, not isolating if feeling unwell or COVID positive, you know, and we have seen, especially in Victoria, that, you know, not everyone is abiding by the rules, but it's really great that majority of people want to come back and they're really quite confident in the sports organisation's ability to cope with the COVID guidelines post-COVID. So what are some barriers to people returning? And I'm sure Eime and Angela are going to be able to talk about this, and you'll have your own thoughts about this as well. But we know during COVID that a lot of people have been transitioning into other forms of physical activity. You know, I've been riding a bike. I've never really ridden a bike before. A lot of people are walking and running. And perhaps too, I think retention is going to be really important during adolescence, because that's when the main drop-off in sport occurs. And if people haven't been able to play football or netball this year or whatever sport, are they going to come back? You know, we really need to connect with those so that they can feel connected again to the sport and community, so they want to come back. Will people choose cheaper options? A lot of people financially going to be impacted. They may choose these individual activities that are not organised and don't require payments. You know, you can walk the dog and it doesn't cost anything. People may choose those less committed, less structured options. There'll also be some people in the population that are quite concerned about their health. You know, I think some sports, you know, we hear reports that, you know, golf and tennis in Victoria and regional Victoria are increasing because they can still occur and physical distancing is easier. I've been playing golf with my son's masked up at Buninyong, you know, and we don't see anyone else except if my son hits it into the wrong fairway and we've got to go over and find the ball. A lot of health professionals are concerned because they're in sort of hotspot areas of work. They're concerned about returning to clubs and maybe infecting other people or getting infected and then not being able to work. There's also older adults and those with health conditions that'll have serious concerns about returning to sport. And cost is going to be a major factor as well. The Australian Sports Foundation just released a report talking about the financial impact of COVID on sports clubs, and that's available on their website. I do think too, a lot of people will prioritise their children, especially mothers. If cost is an issue for the family, they might prioritise their kids playing sport rather than the mum or dad playing sport. You'll probably also see that children aren't playing multiple sports. They're not going to 2 or 3 sports a week. They might be just playing one. But I'd really like to see how sport can think about minimising the cost burden. And it might not just be about registration fees. What are the other little levers that can make it less expensive? For example, why do you need home and away shorts? You don't. You can't wear them at the same time. So that's a double cost for people with that. Why do you need to buy association branded socks, which have a lower market of consumers than a generic brand and therefore more expensive? Why do we pay community level club-based male participants to run around and kick a ball? We need to question these things post-COVID and think about how we can make sport accessible to many. So post-COVID-19, we've been absent from sport, work and our communities, as well as our family and friends. So retention and connecting people back into sport is going to be more important now than ever. It has to be easier to try and retain participants than to try and get new members. Retention is going to be important for not just the players, but for volunteers too. Retaining players is going to be important to be able to field teams and keep clubs alive. How will COVID-19 affect increases that we've seen recently in female participation, especially male-dominated sports over recent years? Will the female teams be viable in terms of number of players? Will the females receive equitable treatment in terms of return to play opportunities? I'd really like to hope so. Many of us, have daughters. Why shouldn't they have the same opportunity as our sons? I believe that COVID-19 provides sport with a unique opportunity to come together as a sector and work collectively as a voice for sport. How can sport work together to make sport better and more connected as a sector? What are the sector level priorities? And how can sport come together and support each other and be one voice for advocacy? Remember, in the end, very few people play sport above the age of 15. So there's enough people out there who don't play sport, who drop out. So the pool of potential participants is large enough for all of sport. I truly believe that a measure of retention is a simple yet effective measure of how a sport or club is going. And we should prioritise retention of participants as a club, clubs and sports success. It shouldn't be only about increasing numbers or winning the premiership. Imagine if we highlighted a club's retention success as a key achievement. And retention in its simplest form means that people enjoyed themselves. They had a good time playing their sport at that club and enough to return. The player retention could mean a range of things, including good governance, club culture, environment, coaching, etc. We're currently working with a number of sports on retention-based research projects, measuring participation trends and asking people why they drop out or why they keep playing. What makes sport fun and staying connected during COVID-19? So we need to re-engage people. And these are just a few ideas that I've seen about re-engagement of participants during COVID when they couldn't play. Social media is so important. All of our youngsters are online all the time. And just tapping into asking people how they are and connecting. My boys were playing football, last year, and they still had training when they could, non-contact training, and that was so important to them. And then when they went down initial lockdown, the team still got together online once a week, and the coach set up little challenges. They had to do little time trials or video kick things and had all these little challenges. And it was really important for my sons to stay connected with their mates. They would really look forward to connecting, even if it was online. And then in Ballarat, when they could return to training just for a couple of weeks, it was so important for them to just connect with their mates. And so we really need to think about how we can stay connected. And there was one really good football training video that Rochelle set up, and you should have a look at it. It was really intended for a small group of football or netballers about how to stay connected, farm fit versus gym fit. But it was just, it's a brilliant clip. So what's the value proposition of sport? I think sport will have or should have a new value proposition. It's always been and should be more pronounced post-COVID about connecting individuals and communities for healthier individuals, families and communities. Exercise during COVID is one of the only 4 reasons you can leave your home. So the government has recognised the significant importance of physical activity. So this should place sport in a good position to claim its fundamental place in society if it's a coordinated effort. Remember why people play. It's not about winning, it's not about medals or trophies. It's about connecting with and playing with others and having fun. Sport can and does connect individuals and communities, and because of this and through playing, we can have healthier individuals, families and communities. So my take-home message: put participant fun central to all decision making. Stay connected with your participants and your members. And here's some examples in the quotes. During the COVID survey, I had to have my name as part of, my phone number as part of ethics that people could contact me. And the survey first went out to golf and bowlers. And I had these guys, older adult demographics bringing me up, saying how disappointed they couldn't play their golf on their bowls. They were saying how important it was for them that they were retired, weren't in the workforce, their family had left home, they might have been living alone as well, how important sport was to connect them with others and their mates. So we need to keep thinking about that. I think we should have a focus on retention and not just increasing numbers. How can sport capitalise on health messaging, particularly the social and mental benefits, which are going to be critical post-COVID? What do you do in sport is important for the health of individuals, families, volunteers and communities. What you do really matters. Thank you, and I look forward to the days when we can return to all playing sport.
Thank you, Rochelle. Lots to think about there. Stacks of questions coming through. What I might do is just leave that screen up for a little minute so people can have a chance to jot down your contact details. And then what I'm going to do is throw to the panel first, and then I will attempt to answer all the questions in the chat. I've tried to pick up some of the Q&A ones as well, but if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat function and I'll go through those. Those questions that we miss, I will chase up an answer from Rochelle or Hans or one of our panellists, and we'll send them through with the post-event survey and the PowerPoint and a connection to the captioning so that you can pick up anything that you've missed because you're not online the whole time, or you want to pass on and that type of thing. So make sure you get Rochelle's information down, and then we'll stop sharing the screen so we can see our panellists. Ah, there they are. Obviously, there's a lot of information there. I'll go to you first, Emma, from Cricket Vic. So Emma looks after all things, everything, participation. You've been involved in this study for a long period of time as a sport. The data's obviously important to you, and retention's obviously a focus. Why have you focused on retention? Obviously, there's a million focuses in your job, but why has it been important for you as a sport?
Thanks, Lisa. And
big
thanks
question.
for
Let's throw it out there.
here today. That's all right. Thank you. So this probably came out of a really strong focus for us participating in a workshop with VicHealth probably a good 12 months ago, and listening to Rochelle present at that time. We have been fortunate to be part of this research project for a number of years and tracking that participation. Yet, what we noted that, yes, we may have increases in participation, but what's the changes in the rate, which is quite different when are we actually measuring the changes in population data as well. So that's where, having a chat with Rochelle, we actually, with support from Sport and Rec Victoria, have recently embarked on our own research project directly into retention and cricket. So we'll get to have some of those findings, and it'll be quite interesting. We're going back over 3 seasons of participation and now retention data, and but it'll be interesting how we make a comparison for this season upcoming for us.
Fantastic. And obviously the how for you is, this is formulated some thinking around getting Rochelle in to really dive into cricket. You've got a interesting demographic, traditionally male, moving into a lot of other areas. Will this help you in where you kind of, focus your efforts after you get this information?
Absolutely. And I think, with early stages of our research and research over the past, since 2015, that 5 to 9-year-old hasn't been our strongest space. So do we now consider, is that the focus that we want to start with? Is it, as Rochelle was speaking about, do we want to look at early entry straight into junior cricket? And particularly from a female perspective as well. Again, those retention rates are actually not strong in that 5 to 9 and early teens. So again, we hope those insights will actually provide us some evidence to say, actually try this approach. The evidence base is really important for our decision making, rather than, we certainly know there's plenty of anecdotal evidence out there and clubs are doing amazing jobs. But sometimes what we think is retention, which is, fed down from our national body to our state body around good governance and child safety, looking at administration, that's fantastic and critical. But is that actually a retention tool for keeping people in your game?
Yeah, interesting. And I think we need to focus our efforts, as Rochelle alluded to, post-COVID, because we're probably going to be a bit leaner in terms of our resources. Particularly, our human resources, at least initially, till we get all back up and running. So focusing and having the data to focus will be really important. I'll go to you, Ange, and then to Hans. Ange, netball's always enjoyed a strong membership, obviously mostly female-based, but not all. How are you using this kind of work and focusing on retention to keep that membership up? Because your members, are you still around the 100,000 plus mark?
In a normal year, yes, we are around 112,000 people. Thanks, Lisa. So I guess we've been working with Rochelle and her team for a number of years and have had a huge amount of data and information that we can work through. Last year, we put together an actual working group to focus on retention. So it has become an important part of our business as usual at Netball Vic. Still to work out the exact KPI, as Rochelle suggested, but we'll get to that hopefully sooner rather than later. As a part of our working group, what we did is we had the good fortune of of Netball Vic actually employing a business analyst. So Fiona has been fantastic to obviously use the data to help us understand exactly what our retention rate is, and obviously had the information from Rochelle as well, but we were able to drill down a little bit more and survey our members. So as you said, Lisa, we're normally at 112,000 members, and what we discovered was year on year, it was around 30% that we would have members drop off. So when you actually crunch the numbers, for us, that equates to around $2 million in terms of money, or income coming into Netball Vic. So when you look at it as a financial situation, that's extreme. We obviously get those numbers back in. We have a steady rate of around that 112,000 membership base, but when you understand that nearly 30,000 people are leaving your sport year on year, there's obviously something going on and we need to address that. So even keeping 1%, so dropping from 30% down to 29%, that has a huge impact to us financially, but also to our affiliates, and ensuring that they remain viable and can keep netball being played at all the courts around Victoria. So our working group, we're continuing to work on it. We all work from home at the moment, obviously, but we meet regularly to discuss how we're continuing to have retention as that business as usual. A lot of the discussion is around how we're going to help our affiliates retain their members. So we've actually got a plan in progress at the moment that will be like a health check for our affiliates. So we're going to use not only our data, but the information that comes from them as well in terms of how we can help them. And a lot of that is education to the player. Like Rochelle said, people play for the love of it, and that was reflected in the survey to us as well, that they play to have fun, to connect with their friends, all those sorts of things. So then it becomes a bit of a marketing strategy. Why do people play? So we need to ensure that that's a strong piece in our marketing and why people play, for that social connectedness. And another part is injuries. So we see a lot of people, particularly with netball, that they stop playing because of injuries. There's also a bit of a dropout, well, I'm not sure a dropout, but being a women's sport, a majority of women's sport, a lot of people leave because they're pregnant, hoping that they do return. But we need to then look at how we make it easier for those mothers to return. So there's so much in the retention piece, that all these little factors, Rochelle mentioned cost, in terms of uniforms and things like that. So again, we have a social rock up netball competition, and it's how we integrate that into our normal business as usual as well. So it's high on the agenda at Netball Vic, and we just hope that some of these learnings that we can pass on to our affiliates and then on to the clubs and players or the participants of netball.
Thanks, Ange. Hans, you've been in this game for a while. You were lucky enough to teach me at Deakin years ago. You've been at a few universities and worked, you know, your expertise is around the business insights in sport. Do you think we're getting, obviously this study gives us some great insights into what we should be doing and how we can use, do you think we're getting better at it in sport? Are we finally getting there? Because we're obviously not, we don't use the insights as well as a fast moving consumer good company or something like that. We haven't got the resources all the time to do it, but do you think we're getting there? We're making better decisions based on the data?
Well, yeah, I can probably answer that question in two parts. It first of all requires you to accept and understand across the whole of organization that evidence-based decision making is actually a smart thing to do. That you don't base too much on your passion for or gut feel, which has been a hallmark of sport. You know, the strength of sport is also its inherent weakness, and that is if you let emotion override your rational decision making, then you're in a whole heap of trouble. And that part, I think, is happening. I think across sport, and this is also a matter of education. I mean, so many, you refer to university-educated managers of sport. That has pretty much happened. So I think the industry has matured tremendously with the influx of a lot of people that have a solid educational background into how you manage organizations and operate organizations. And with that comes rational decision making. However, I think just by the time we have come to the realization that evidence-based decision making is important, we've been confronted with globalization 4.0, which basically is digitalization or digitization of all of our interaction, our operations, which requires a whole new skill set to consider the insights that you gain from data. And in a big data project such as Sport and Recreation Spatial, you know, we've only even been looking at the surface of what the data can tell us, and we're delving deeper and deeper into it. And I agree with both Emma and Angela. They made various statements that all refer to the importance of taking a marketing perspective and view of the whole of your membership. The unfortunate thing for traditional marketeers is that it's not the marketeer who's in control anymore and say, okay, this is our product and now we are going to segment the market according to the specific characteristics of the target market that we're pursuing. It's turned around, and you know, and so it's not even. I mean, Angela said, why do people play? Well, and the question beyond that is, how do they play? With whom do they play? What's their information-seeking behavior? How do they engage with activities between different sports, multi-sports, and what are their preferences between those sports in order to modify your focused offer as a single sport? So that's maybe a bit of an elaborate answer to your question, but I do believe that the understanding is there, but the industry is now in need of a whole new upskilling in terms of being able to become. You can't become digital natives. You know, the next generation of adolescents are digital natives. They have grown up in an era and in an environment where engaging in a digital environment becomes natural. or comes natural rather. For many of us working in sport and having had a long and successful history in it, it is literally almost starting from scratch in terms of how to use those data skills in a new way. And I'll stop there. I mean, you can tell I can talk long and wide about this because it's fascinating space, but also very complex.
Yeah, and in the ideal world, the data that you're looking at would be from every single sport. You know, every single database would be mined, and we can support sport to do it, because obviously Eime and Ange have got some resources in they're in bigger sports, but how about the smaller sports who are run entirely by volunteers? How can we help them with their data? How can we make sure they've got the data in a form that we can use? You know, how can we make sure the data's clean so that what Rochelle's team are looking at is actually going to be helpful? You know, there's a whole lot of things there. I might go to a few questions and then circle back.
And just a quick response to that, Lisa. That's one of the benefits of having access to 12 different sports on a census basis. So we're not only looking at sport by sport, but we're also looking across sport and identifying underlying trends that may not be able to be observed in one sport. But when you look at the holistic picture of across and within 12, and the different profiles of demographics and psychographics, then you suddenly unearth deeper insights that you can only get if you indeed, like you say, look across sport rather than within one sport.
In one sport.
And Lisa, can I just add to that? About the quality of systems and which has good data. I mean, good data in can be good knowledge out, and shit data in can be pretty average information out. And I've always said that. The best systems are those where the participant logs on themselves and registers as an individual, rather than relying on volunteers and clubs to fill in, you know, literally teams and teams and teams of people. So if the individual has to log in once a year, and that information is stored, so the next year they don't have to change their date of birth or their residential location if they haven't changed it. So that's the best data in. And also too, simple little things like those annoying asterisks, you know, that you can't move on unless you don't put your date of birth, your gender or your postcode. So some simple demographic informations can mean a lot, but if you don't make it compulsory for a simple few little questions, you might have 30% of your people that haven't indicated their date of birth. So you don't know for 30% of your clients how old they are. Are they up the older adults end? And so then how do you plan your programs and competitions if you don't know who your client base is?
Yes, very true. We're getting there. We're getting more and more sports on databases, and they're easier to use, and we get there. And it's always fraught with danger, because it's you know, it might be a nationally led database that a state doesn't want to use, or it might be a good state database that, yeah, we won't go into the politics of databases because we might be here all day. I'll just ask a question, Rochelle, in terms of the data that you've gathered, and I won't answer these questions, I'll let you guys answer them, but does it give you some indication of minority groups, you know, binary, disability, you know, that are coming through, or is that really dependent on the database? What other insights do we get in relation to participation for particular groups?
Yeah, the minority groups, some sports collect good information in terms of, you know, Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander called, so they might ask, do you speak a language other than English at home, disability, but it's not consistent. So we're trying to work with Sport Australia, some NSOs, as well as our state-based organisations through our project with VicHealth, yourself and SRB, to try and have a consistent questions across the board. So it's no good if one sport asks it one way and another sport asks it another way. We can't look at it from a sector level. So we are trying to work with the sector to try and have consistent measurement of those minority groups. But again, like you said, a lot of those state-based sports are reliant on a national system. So we've got to try and get it at a national level, that consistency, so we can report better on that.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, does the data pick up on people that have left a sport but perhaps gone to another? Like, do we go down to individual level?
Yeah, because if I register for tennis, I have a tennis ID. If I play netball, I have a netball ID. So those IDs don't match. We have done some research in the past, which we've published. So we tracked individuals by connecting their date of birth, their gender, and their residential location. So If they were the same in netball and the same in tennis, we linked those people, we linked those data together to say they were the same person. And we have looked at those patterns. Now, for most people, that would be the same person, except for my instance, I've got twin boys, so they may not be the same person. But we're actually doing some stuff. We're funded by Change Our Game at the moment, looking at the transition of females into male-dominated sports. So are they coming from outside of sport, new to sport, or are they coming from female sports and transitioning across? So we're actually doing a whole lot, and the patterns are amazing. You know, a lot of people do move around in sports, so we do know that. I mean, if you think about your own lifestyle, I mean, I played a lot of tennis and netball until I was too injured with knees. I still play tennis now, pre-COVID, go to the gym and try and do Pilates. So think about your own lifespan, how activities change. People do move around, and they do move across sports quite a lot. And that's why I think we need more sector level research and advocacy, instead of thinking in silos all the time.
Thanks, Rochelle. The other thing is, and this data has obviously been taken from the Netball Vics, the Cricket Vics, all through their membership. So it covers, you know, community, young, through to semi-professional. So it's the whole membership. Is that true, or is it just
anyone who's registered with a community club? So it's not professional. So it covers modified sports, and it covers some social rec programs if they have individual registrations for that. And that's something I'd like to think that sports can improve too in the future. There's a lot of social rec programs out there, but they're not capturing individual data. And again, it only needs to be a couple of questions. So we don't actually know how much uptake a lot of these other social rec programs have had if we don't have good data.
Yeah,
There's another question. Sorry, Hans?
Quick one to add there, because I saw in the chat some of the questions, for example, about the cricket census data some years ago, or not census, I guess. But this data is club-based community participation. And it is close to 100% accurate, as Rochelle says, because it is all those who register and pay a fee to a local club to play. And so it's not counting, you know, if you hit a ball in the schoolyard, we count you. And if you play an introductory program on a Saturday morning, we count you again.
Yeah, you've got to be on the database.
Yeah, we exclude school-based data from that respect. Otherwise, you know, if you touch 10 balls, you'd 10 sports. We exclude school-based data, and we also clean the data so that you're only counted once. So, for example, you know, you might play a summer comp and a winter comp, and you might play at 2 different associations. So in the database, you might actually be in there 4 or 5 times. We strip that out so that there's no duplication or double counting, and it's a level playing field of analysis and reporting. So we report and analyze each sport exactly the same, so that the results are comparable.
Thank you. There's a few questions about, you know, digging down into why people might have dropped out, whether it be an access issue, a language issue, not being able to afford the equipment, you know, those type of things. Is that the next step? Is there any insights in the current data, or is that the next step where we need to chase down why they're not retained and keep them in? Is that a study, or is that an individual sport thing?
So that requires sort of primary data collection, new projects. So we're currently working with cricket and netball on some state and national studies. So what we'll do is we'll survey those people that have come back to sport post-COVID and those that haven't come back, and we'll be asking them why, as it relates to, you know, normal non-COVID things as well as maybe COVID. So that'll be things around the play structure, the cost, the social support, but also too, what play structure they would maybe like it to look at. So maybe not playing over, you know, 6 hours all of Saturday. You know, we know a lot of people want to come in and out in an hour, and that's why a lot of these other things like gym and Pilates have been increasing, because it's in and out in an hour. So those play formats, do we need to try and have some other options rather than the competitive model? Now, I know it's difficult to have, you know, lots of different programs and play formats, but I think we need to have some organised, not super competitive play formats.
Yeah, and dig down into those groups. Why are people leaving? Is it a barrier? Is it socioeconomic? Is it because in netball had a couple of kids? You know, those type of things. And you outlined before that, you know, netball, that is a particular issue because you've obviously got a membership of mostly women. Have you got any particular programs that you've targeted those groups where you've recognised that women have kids might be slow to come back to netball? Have you done anything in particular to kind of target that group?
In a way, yes, and we're still working on these programs, but we obviously have our Rock Up Netball, which is a lot more social, and we've got various formats of that where people can come and just train and learn the skills of netball, or if they're coming back, just, you know, sort of almost rehash their skills and then feel confident to be able to take to a competition, which may prevent them. So they don't want to necessarily jump straight into competition. And then the competition that we do run through Rock Up Netball is a lot more relaxed, social. Obviously, the requirements for uniform may not be as high. So those socks you talk about, Rochelle, or the nicks that they have to wear underneath the skirt, or whether or not they have to wear a skirt, all those things are removed. So it does make it a lot easier for people to come back and return to netball. And the other one is walking netball. So other states have done this very well, New South Wales and Queensland, and we've just used some funding through SRV to create a way to play walking netball. So for our affiliates, they can use that information to help them start up those competitions a lot easier than trying to do it themselves. So a couple of things that we have for people returning to netball. And just the other thing is obviously trying to reduce the injury. So netball, again, Rochelle, you refer to your knees. I've had 4 ankle recos, so I know exactly what it's like. And we have a knee program. So it's about ensuring that all our participants are aware of those sorts of things and introduce that to their daily, or when they are playing netball, that they do those sorts of things. They do that knee program to try and reduce their injuries. So yeah, there's a number of things that we're working on. It's just, again, we need to educate our affiliates and right down to the clubs and participants on how they can use those resources.
Beautiful. Yeah, rock up netball sounds good to me. There is no way I'm getting back into a lycra dress. I can tell you right now, that is just not going to happen.
Yeah, especially during COVID.
Not a good look.
May not fit in for next season. I'm a bit worried.
And Emma, you've got some programs that have addressed different groups and wanting to be in a more relaxed environment, because cricket's pretty full on in terms of, you know, tradition and uniform. You're, is it Social Sixes? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
I should know, but that, you know, you're doing that type of thing as well to try to have probably a more friendly introduction to the sport for different groups. How's that been going?
Absolutely. Look, it's been going well. We're now into, this will be our 3rd season. We hope a 3rd season, I should say, potentially post-Christmas. So Social Sixes is absolutely an opportunity for women who have not tried cricket before but would love to give it a go, learn some basic skills, similar to Rock Up Netball. There are no uniforms required. It's just literally come and have a go. There has been a number of cricket associations and clubs that have grown this initiative, and now it's a social women's comp, which is fantastic. So it's, you know, they've gone from that sampling now to sustainability. We also have, we did a research probably about 5 years ago now for our multicultural communities, and particularly, you know, cricket, we're quite fortunate that there's many South Asian communities, cricket playing nations, you know, living in Victoria, living in Australia. Yet the way they want to play is not the way club cricket is traditionally played for them. So we established the Harmony Cricket Association, and we've now got over 100 teams in that league, that association, and they're playing the way they want to play cricket, whether it's uniforms or not, whether it's the number of overs. They don't train, they just really generally play on a weekend. So for us, about that retention and providing opportunities is about providing choice and allowing people to play they want to play. I think post-COVID, we're going to have to be more flexible in that as well. Noting that to get people to come back, and pending when that return date is, we might have to look at a lot more flexible formats. You know, I know in certain competitions there won't be 2-day cricket. You know, it might just be 1 day or 20 T20 comp. So yeah, lots of modifications this season, which for me personally, I feel provides us with this enormous amount of scope in the way we move forward with our team sport.
Yeah, if we can't do things differently and be innovative after COVID, then we're probably not going to have a chance to. Hans, I've got a question for you. Is there any insights along the way through your study or stuff that you've seen around the world that gives a dollar amount about how much it costs to attract someone versus retaining someone? That was a question from Aidan.
Yeah, well, in your regular marketing literature, you will find multipliers along the lines of it costs about 20 times, it's about 5 times more expensive to get a new customer compared to retaining one. So that's a multiplier of 5, which, you know, if you translate that to a dollar cost, then it makes a hell of a lot of sense to focus your scarce resources on retention rather than trying to bring people in. And that is only recruitment costs, right? So it's not about introducing them, going through the whole shebang of bringing people into the club environment, teaching them about the sport and about your club ethos and culture. So, and that's another thing in that regard. I saw on the chat when I browsed through, when Rochelle was talking, one of the attendees said, culture trumps strategy every time. and I love that statement because, you know, at the core of community sport is of course it's sport, but it is, you go to the club because you belong and you engage and you socialize and you meet kindred spirits, people who are passionate about the sport, but also, you know, for your weekend or midweek dose of social connection. And culture is extremely important. Rochelle mentioned, you know, why do we pay amateur footy players to run around the paddock on a Saturday afternoon when that money, and I'm sorry, mostly boys that I'm touching your beer money here, but that's, with all due respect, that's a waste of resource. That's not what community sport is about. And if you only play because you get some money, then you really do not belong in a community sports club. So I cannot give you a definitive dollar amount, but the multiplier that, you know, relates getting a new customer versus keeping an existing one from generic marketing literature says it all to me.
Yep, thank you for that. Yes, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well done, Tom. That's Tom from Vicsport, who's our participation guru. Yep. But he's very right. And his question kind of leads on to how do we create that culture? You know, you know, how do we be belonging? When I was looking after Little Athletics years ago, we talked about having what we called a mother hen at the gate. Now that was a male or a female, whoever was the kind of welcoming, motherly kind of character in the club that would meet people at the gate, because in big venues, you come along as a new participant, and if you don't find the welcoming face and someone to lead you to exactly where you're going to be, you probably turn around and go. So that kind of was one of the strategies we tried to kind of make sure people were greeted as they got out of the car and sent to whatever part of the track they were at. In basketball, doing the same things was at basketball. You go to a stadium with 10 courts, which court am I on? I met this person at school, I can't find them. Where's that coach I talked to on the phone? Without that kind of front desk welcoming person, you know, what are some of the other things, Rochelle, that you've seen that make a welcoming club that retains people? You know, what sports are doing it, or clubs you've seen that are doing it really well?
Yeah, I mean, before you get to the welcoming club, I've been probably a member of probably 30 different clubs as I've moved around in my life and had a family in that. But every time I've gone to a club, and again too, you know, I'm a sporty person, I'm quite good at sport, sporty family, and quite, you know, confident to be able to approach, you know, to play. But it's always been because I've known someone. And I would argue, especially with our children, so they want to play sport because their mates are playing sport. And it's that snowball effect of knowing someone that then you get a contact, or you go with that friend or that family member or whatever. But I really think that, you know, we play because we want to be connected with our friends and others. But I think the majority of people connect to a club because they know someone there or something about it is, I think, that initial step. So, you know, bring a friend, and then that snowballing of your current members to try and encourage them to reach out to their friends and networks. And when it comes to welcoming and inclusive, we've done a lot of stuff, particularly with adolescent girls. And you're right, Lisa, it's about just being friendly and nice. It's not that difficult, is it? You know, not yelling at them because they're not very good, or not benching them because they're not very good. It's that friendly face. So, you know, and I know when I've gone to clubs too, or new clubs, it's that name tag that says I'm the president, and that smile and hello, how are you? What can I help you with? And it's just about being nice. It's not that difficult.
You'd think, yeah, and you know, I consider that us sport heads are pretty friendly kind of characters. I'd hope that we do that a lot. But a question for you specifically, Emma, from Richie, who was involved in cricket in the past and is now involved in another sport. But, you know, how do you get clubs to follow your lead and ways and be friendly and do the things you know that are going to work to encourage different groups to come into the club? You know, to kind of follow your path that you're obviously researching. How do you know, incentivize them or, you know, cajole them to do what you need them to do at club level? It's a tricky thing. Some will do it naturally. They've got the friendly people. They've got others have a bit of a different, more, you know, traditional kind of approach that's probably not ideal for a lot of different people coming into the club. How do you convince them to follow your checklist basically and toe the line?
Yeah, you know, at a lot of clubs and a lot of volunteers, and you know, the way I grew up in volunteerism, in that, you know, your father or your mother, your parent would be at that club you're at and be there your whole journey or life of playing at that particular club. And I see that evolving in club cricket or community cricket. So there's an element of volunteering comes into that. Two things. So you need to allow people to get there in their own time. That's what I've learned, because if we're continuing pushing to say you've got to have an entry-level program, you've got to have a junior program, got to have the female, we do want all that, but it also undoes what we're trying to do about retention. So it's allowing clubs choice and space to get there. But it's also the way we support and develop our volunteers, because it's great to say we need you to do this, we need you to do that, but we're actually not developing their personal skills and building capacity at that club to enable them to become that, and what we would love them to become as well. A lot of clubs naturally do it and perhaps don't actually understand the depth of the difference they're making in their communities. I learned of an example of a club yesterday that has a really strong focus on mental health and well-being, and sports chaplaincies engaged at this particular club. That's what's connecting them and binding them. So cricket's just what we do. So perhaps it's changing that mindset of, and encouraging and sharing more information with these people to bring them along our journey, and noting that not everyone will get there, but we're going to have to learn to accept that at some point as well. There's also, I think, Richie, there's a balance in, it connects slightly going off track, but it's also about the requirements of our national bodies and our sponsors that want to see, you know, you as the number one participation sport or things like that, which, you know, is pushing us to be one thing, whereas clubs and connecting communities is actually about another thing, and that's the retention piece. So kind of answered your question, I think, there.
Yes, it's a good question, and we know that, you know, as you said, I like your statement about you know, giving people time and bringing them on the journey, because it does take time. I think anything new that we introduce, particularly in a, you know, a very traditional sport, we'll find it hard. There's a question for you, Rochelle, here about, you were noting the difference between Gunnewarra and Melbourne councils in terms of retention. Have you noticed any significant differences in retention data between rural and urban environments in general? And if so, what does it look like?
That's a good question. I'd actually have to look at the data. We've definitely got that data. I think, from memory, you know, I would have to check up on this, that retention's higher in regional areas, but often too participation's higher as a percentage of the population, because basically once you get out of your Melbourne and major cities, there's not a lot of leisure options to do. There's your traditional sports, and that's basically it. You know, out in the bush, you don't have necessarily, you know, Pilates classes or fancy gyms. So the choice of activities is much less. So, and also too, the social glue that sport is in regional areas is so important. That's how people connect to their communities. And so sport's, you know, really important for them, and retention is generally higher, but participation is generally higher as a rate of the population in regional and rural areas.
And just another question, it might be one for
Lisa, sorry,
go Ange.
In the data, the survey results that we had come back both from current and past players, it was interesting to note. So we did divide them into metro and regional based on their postcode. And I'm just looking at the information, and it was interesting that the current players from metro suggested that they were a social player. However, in regional Victoria, they suggested that they were a serious netballer. So it's interesting for us then to reflect on that and how we're going to use that information, and whether or not, it's just how we'll use that with our affiliates and ensure that people are getting the right kinds of competition that they're searching for. But it might be just the fact that in metro, there's a lot more competitions that people can access, and they might sort of be playing in what other people might determine as a serious competition. But they themselves think it's more social. And that might be just because they're playing with their friends, where other people are playing in exactly the same competition, but they're there to win. So again, data in, you're not sure how to use it and interpret it, but it was interesting to see there was a distinct difference between regional and metro.
Very interesting. Now we've got a couple more questions before we wind up, but just so I don't forget it at the end, Rochelle, if people want to look at the data in more detail, where do they go? And you know, what will the data tell them apart from your gathering all the data into themes today? Where can they jump in and have a look at it?
Yeah, so our website, we have publicly available any of the integrated reports. So everything where sports are all put in together, and analysis is done. It'll name who the sports are involved in the study, but we don't make publicly available, you know, AFL's data or Netball's data unless we get the okay through them. But if any sports are interested, they just send me an email. Happy to have a chat. But any of the publicly available documents, reports, or if you're really interested, peer-reviewed publications are available on our website. But if people want to know some further information or some further analysis, just give me an email.
And another question, is there any, we've talked before about digging down into the data with regards to demographics and inclusion groups, which, you know, is limited depending on the databases. But is there any data on coaches? Has that been touched on, or is it purely participants?
For the project that we're funded for, it's purely participants. But we do have access to Ausplay data as well through Sport Australia. So we get recent updates of that, and we'll do quite a number of analysis with that, which is good because it's has a lot more, you know, different variables in their survey. So we're actually doing some analysis at the moment of non-player roles, so those in coaching and administration and officiating, and seeing how that's changed over time and in relation to gender and different states. So we do some analysis. But again, too, if sports want to know something about and they've got coaching data, we can always do other projects as well.
Beautiful. And Hans, your fivefold information about marketing versus retaining, where can we steer someone to have a bit of a look at that? Is there a specific area, or people just pop it into, where would they look if they were, you know, wanting to put into their board?
It is either sales or services marketing literature in general. Yep. But I will look up some resources and share them with you, and we can in post webinar share it with all those who are interested.
Fantastic, because obviously, you know, some people would be wanting to pitch that rhetoric into their board about focusing on retention rather than on new members.
Yeah.
I think most boards and most, as Rochelle talked to, most people are measuring about numbers. But if it's easier to retain than to market and get new people, then that can be a focus for the teams below the board and CEO. But then obviously some boards will want data and how do we do this and how can we do this better? So there's a lot of chat about that. And
on that, Lisa, we'll also inform the participants about some digital marketing stuff that we are going to do with one of our partners, VicUni, and one of our external partners that people may be interested in, an upskilling exercise. So we'll share that with the participation list today as well. Yeah, and there's a whole lot of, I'll go through the Q&A and the chat afterwards. If there's questions that we haven't touched at all, I'll go back to the panel, the relevant person, and grab an answer, and we'll pop that in our post-event email, because we obviously hadn't had time to get to the hundreds of messages. But thank you everyone for dialing in. Thank you for asking the questions. Before we go, I just want one last word from each of our panelists, and to kind of answer the question on what would be the main thing you would do if you were sitting and you were the participation development manager in a particular SSA at this point of time. What would the main thing you would be focusing on? And obviously Ange and Emma can talk to what they are focusing on. Rochelle, what would you be doing if you're given that job tomorrow? You're in a medium-sized sport in Victoria, and you're in the interview, and they say, what are you going to focus on to increase our numbers in our sport?
Connecting with participants and members, staying connected with them, especially when they can't play, and have a focus on retention.
Beautiful. Hans, what would you say if you were in that interview?
I would have to go back to my own base, which is to create deeper insights into what moves people in general, and in particular in regard to my sport. And I would definitely tell my colleagues in my sport that to go back to our core, which is why are people passionate about our sport, and how can we make other people passionate about our sport? So back to the very core of your sports product, and link that to your insights about your wider marketplace.
Beautiful. And Emma, you've got to win your job back. What's your main pitch to the interview panel about how you're going to continue to get more people engaging in sport from various different walks of life?
We want to build safe and connected clubs.
Beautiful. Ange?
If I was working for the state body, I would understand what it's worth to us. So as Hans just sort of mentioned, the fivefold in terms of what it's going to cost to get a new member, as opposed to what it costs to keep a member, and how much that's worth. So I mentioned before that financial dollar, and especially in these times when we may not be getting more members in to play, just exactly the benefit of retaining our members and what that's worth to the organisation.
Yeah, and have a full court press across the organisation. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Can I please get everyone to, in the background, silently applaud for Rochelle, for Hans, for Ange and Emma. Thank you so much for contributing today. We've had a lot of people on the call, great interaction in terms of the chat and a bit of Q&A. So we'll follow up with everyone and send you out some answers to questions that weren't answered, to give you Rochelle's PowerPoint, some captioning if you need that. And if there's anything else you need, please contact us. But thank you from all of us. Thank you to VicHealth and SRV for the support of this research that Rochelle and Hans's team have been doing, and research that we can all use. But jump into the Sport Spatial website, have a look at the details, and follow up if you need to, and ask any questions directly. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.